But first, a word from our sponsors. Hey folks, Brian here. Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? I remember about a year ago when I first got the idea to do this, I was agonizing over the logistics of it, remembering stories, researching video games to talk about, and various other things. Then once I got all that together, I was like, how can I get all this stuff out there on the internet for people to listen to? Places like, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other outlets that you're able to hear this show. And then, very recently, I thought, well, how can I make some money off of it? Well, the answer to these questions, my friend, is really simple. Anchor is the one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors too, so you can get paid for your podcast. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start. That is anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear from you. Later. Hey folks, Brian here. Just before we start the show, I just want to take a minute and ask that if you enjoy the show, tell a friend, like and subscribe. It really helps to get the show out there and to grow it and to attract more listeners. Also, if you want to support the show directly, you can donate to the show at anchor.fm/COAA/support. For as little as 99 cents a month, you can help to keep the show going and to mitigate some of the costs that the show entails. Thank you for your time and your generosity. Now, enough of that. Let's get on with the show. I'm home.
This is the Confessions of an Arcade Addict podcast, an introspective look into video gaming from the classic era until today. Now here is your host, Brian.
Hey folks, what's going on out there? Brian here, and this is episode 7 of Confessions of an Arcade Addict. Actually, this time I do have a voicemail. This is the first direct correspondence to the show, and it is from Orbital Albert, which is a really interesting name. A lot of alliteration going there, even though it's not even a lot of things with the letter O or A, but I like it. So yes, here's his voicemail.
Hey, Confessions of an Arcade Addict. I just listened to the first half of episode 1, and it's great. I do agree that arcade machines are a lot more expensive anytime that you're playing in any type of amusement park. And I really like the idea. I'm excited to hear you reminisce about old arcades. I have my own podcast on here called Pinball Nerds Podcast, and my host name anyways is Orbital Albert. And if you'd like to call in back and leave a message on my show, I'd be certain to share it on one of my upcoming podcasts. And who knows, maybe there'll be some overlap between barcade and arcade reminiscing and that sort of thing. Cheers.
Thanks, Albert. I will definitely be checking out your podcast as soon as I can. And I will certainly give you some correspondence and some feedback on what I listen to as well. Again, thank you for your voicemail. And again, if you guys want to get a hold of the show, share stories, have critiques, anything of a positive nature, you can get a hold of me at arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. That's all one word. Also, there is a voicemail number, and that number is 734-743-2433. And there is also a strong social media presence. On Facebook, just search for Confessions of an Arcade Addict. On Twitter, you can get a hold of me at arcadeaddict_B. On Instagram, it is arcadeaddictbrian, all one word. And on Tumblr, it is tumblr.com/blog/confessions of an arcade addict. So there are ways of getting hold of the show. You can also go and drop a voicemail on Anchor like Albert did, and I will certainly listen to it, and depending on its content, of course, I will post it here on the show in the next episode. So you will be contributing. So without any further ado, let's see. We have a jam-packed show today. I have quite a bit to talk about, and also a segment of On the Road at the end. So without any further ado, let's get into Arcade Rundown.
Good morning, Mr. Phelps. Your mission, Jim, should you decide to accept it, is to make Stefan believe Townsend's information. As always, should you or any of your IM force be caught or killed, the Secretary will disavow any knowledge of your actions. This tape will self-destruct in 5 seconds. Good luck, Jim.
Arcade Rundown. This one is for the Milford area. Now, Milford, Connecticut, I'm pretty familiar with. It is a town on the west end of New Haven County. It's a town roughly halfway between Bridgeport and New Haven, right along Interstate 95. And I'm familiar with it because I have friends who live there. My old friend John lives there. My best friend Robert lives there. I went to private school there in 1982, going into 83. But more to the point, there were arcades there. And boy, were there arcades in Milford, let me tell you. We're going to be talking about all of the ones that I went to in the Milford/Orange area. Now, Orange, Connecticut is the next town east from Milford, heading towards New Haven. So, without any further ado, let's see. We'll start at the Connecticut Post Mall. I think the arcade's name was Tilt, although my memory is a little bit fuzzy. I don't remember if it had a name or not, but if it was, I think it was Tilt. I first discovered this when I started going with Mark on his arcade runs. And that was, I would say, probably right around springtime, summer of 82. I think Mark is like 17 years old or something like that. I think I'm 13. I think Mark is 4 years older than me. But, yeah, so to give a little bit of backstory, I mean, Mark and I, we were friends from Trumbull Mall Arcade. I wouldn't even call us friends in the beginning. I was just more like the annoying little brother to him. And I'm pretty sure he would say the same thing if you asked him. And yes, folks, I plan on having Mark on the show in an interview/storytelling segment in the future, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, Mark and I met in the arcade, and I used to hang out with him all the time. He was like one of the guys who was one of the regulars in the place who actually treated me pretty well. Anytime I asked him about a game as to, how do you do this? How do you accomplish that? He would tell me for the most part. So considering he was like one of the few guys who frequented that arcade who treated me with any sort of decency, I decided to hang out with him as much as I could. So, yeah, so that started, I want to say, in had to be probably summer of 81, maybe going into the fall of 81. I can't remember exactly. I think we met right around then. And probably in the following year, I think that's when we started, hanging out and he started, taking me to different places. And that's when he showed me the Connecticut Post Mall arcade. And that place was a really decent arcade. It was one of these that it was an elongated floor area. I mean, it was long. It was, I want to say, from where the entrance was all the way to the back, it was several hundred feet. Like I'd say probably like 300 feet or something like that. But it wasn't very wide. It was enough to have video games along the wall, along the back wall, and then along the opposite wall. I remember this place was like, it was like right at the front of the mall. It was attached to the mall, sort of. I mean, basically, when you went into the Connecticut Post Mall from the main entrance, you would walk along this little like outdoor walkway, but it was, basically it was, you were covered under the build because it was like an overhang that went right into the front doors for the mall proper. But before you got to those doors, the entrance to the arcade was to the left. And like I said, it wasn't very wide, but it was long. But it was enough where you could get video games along the wall, along the outside wall, ringing the entire structure, and some video games in the middle of the floor, heading back toward, heading from the main entrance towards the back wall. So, they had a nice little mix of games. Of course, most of the games of the day, we're talking 82, we're talking like, Dig Dug and Robotron and I know they had Mad Planets. Mad Planets, I think, came out in 83, but they had a machine. That was one of the games that they had that Milford Rec didn't have. I used to hang out there quite a bit, and especially when I started going to private school later that year. If I had the money, I would take the bus from school after school was done, and I would go over to Connecticut Post Mall, and I would hang out there for like an hour, maybe 2 hours before, I got my butt home, because, going to private school in Milford was a little bit of a trek. I've talked about it when I did this description for Galaga, but basically it was like take one bus downtown, walk to the train station, get on the train, get off in Milford, and then I'd have to walk from the train station to where the school was, which was, I want to say, I'd say probably about half to 3/4 of a mile. And then after that, after school was up, if I had some money or if I just didn't feel like going home right away, I would just get on a local bus and go to the Connecticut Post Mall and hang out there for a little while, spend any money that I had, on some games, and then I would take the bus. Depending on how late it was, I would either take the bus back to downtown Milford and get on the train and go home that way, or if I was feeling really adventurous, and this happened quite a bit, I would take the local bus from the Connecticut Post Mall to the Docks Shopping Center in Stratford, which was right across the bridge from Devon, which is like this little town before you get into Milford. And then I would take the number 2 bus from the Dock Shopping Center to downtown Bridgeport and take the number 8 bus home. There were some days where I would not get home until, I would say probably like, 8 o'clock at night. And by that time, I'm worn out. I barely have enough energy to do my homework and then go to bed and get up and do this all the next day. So, yeah, I mean, this arcade was really nice. I remember it was dark. It had dark carpeting, not a lot of lights, not a lot of ambiance that I remember. And like I said, I will be reviewing this arcade in arcade review. Um, had interesting games. And I remember people would go there because they had some games that Milford Rec didn't have, which is saying something. And from there, we'll go to Milford Rec, which I call in my memories, I call it the Mecca because it was. This was the largest arcade in the region that I knew about. I'm pretty sure it was, if it wasn't the biggest arcade in the state, it was close. I don't think there was an arcade bigger. I certainly didn't hear of one that was bigger when I was a kid, and I don't think I've heard one that was bigger since. If anybody out there who's listening um, used to frequent Milford Rec or know of an arcade in Connecticut that was bigger, drop me a line and let me know. There might have been one that was up in Hartford somewhere, but I never heard of it. But anyway, to continue, like I said, this place was the Mecca. It was video gaming heaven. I remember the first time I went up there with Mark, and I walked in, and you would have thought that you had seen, or excuse me, not seen, you would have heard, angels singing in a chorus, and this white light shining down from above because I was completely blown away. And that was just the main area. Um, Milford Rec, even back then, had 3 areas. Um, the first area was the main entrance where most of the people came in and out. But that main area had, I want to say it had, either you had 12 or 16 pool tables. There was this big area that had an iron fence, not a fence, but like this is real small fence around it, sort of enclosing it. And that's where the pool tables were. Um, Immediately ahead, you had 2 token machines, if I remember right. And then to your right was the entrance to the second area and the main desk where you could get, change for whatever bills you had. If you wanted to rent out pool balls to go play pool, that's where you would pay for it. I think it was, the rates were like for half an hour or something like that. I think out of all the times I've been to Milford Rec, I think I played pool there maybe twice. And I went to Milford Rec there quite a bit from 82 until I left the region in 93. Um, but around the area where the pool tables were, it was like this slightly raised walkway around the perimeter. And along that perimeter were arcade games going all the way down the wall. And there was, of course, the back wall, which I think didn't have any games on it, but the opposite wall going back towards the front desk, that was all arcade games. And most of them were all the classics. I think there was like anything before 1982, I think. Something like that, because I remember they had a Galaga machine there, they had a Galaxian machine there, and Pac-Man, and all the games of the day, going all the way back to probably like 78. I think they had a Space Invaders machine in that row. So that was the main area. The second area, which was not very large but large enough, that had more games in it. More games of games of the time of the day, because I've seen everything from Nintendo um the Nintendo games that they came out with in like 84. And I'm not like talking like Punch Out or anything like that. I'm talking like the ones that had tennis and golf and stuff like that. I keep forgetting what they're called. They're not the Play Choice ones, but they were like the standalone machines with that had dual monitors that if you wanted to play somebody in tennis, you would take one screen, the guy would take the other screen. It was like that. I forget what those are called. Um, I saw games like that, to like track and field back in like 1984 when it came out. Um, and this place had the majority of their pinball machines, but it was sort of a connection from the main area to the third area, which had more games. And some skill games, at least at first, until they started expanding, they had some skill games towards the back, but they had more arcade games in there. So if you were an addict like I was, if you walked in there with, say, let's say $10, $20, and that was the other thing, now that I think about it, Milford Rec had really good, uh they had really excellent token specials. I think their going rate was 5 for $1 and like 25 for $5 or something like that. But every once in a while, it would get bumped up to like 6 for $1 and like, I'd say probably like 30 for $5 or something like that. And of course, as time went on, of course, then they had more specials. Like once they got the token exchange machines that would take $10 and $20 bills, of course, those specials would increase. Like I think it was like, I want to say it was like 100 tokens for $20 or something like that. Something really, really ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, this place was jumping. Almost every time I went in that place, it was packed. Well, not even packed, but it was busy. On the weekends, it was packed. So it was just wonderful to go to. I mean, there was a time where I was going with Mark to Milford Rec once a week, especially over the summer. Over the summer, he would go there at least, once a, probably like a Saturday. Every once in a while it'd be a Sunday. And if I caught up with him at Trumbull Mall Arcade, or if I uh, caught up with him at his job at Bolorama, I'd ask him if he was going to Milford Rec. And if he was, I'd say, ask him if I could tag along with him. And most of the times I did. Um, Through the years, Milford Rec expanded. They had uh, batting cages, go kart tracks. They had a lower level, um, which they converted to an area more for kids. They had more games down there, but they were more kid oriented, kid friendly. I remember they had a Cabaret Pac Man down there. They had Red Baron down there. Um, but yeah, it was mostly for kids. It was bright colors, clowns, that kind of stuff, tables for birthday parties and stuff like that. Um, I'm trying to remember when this happened. I think it was either 90 or 91. They actually got a Nathan's restaurant in there. Now, for those who don't know, Nathan's is a rather legendary hot dog company based out of New York, Coney Island, if I'm not mistaken. And they actually got a Nathan's restaurant in there. So sometimes by this time, I'm going with, I have other friends who, tend to want to go to Milford Rec, and I go with them. And by this time, I'm also employed. I've got a little bit of money. So either I had my own money to play the games, or I would cajole my buddy Chris into taking me. And, you know, and basically he said, if you're buying, I'm driving. And I said, yeah, sure. So I gave him $5 for gas and gave him another $5 for tokens, and we made a day of it, things like that. So, um, the problem was, is that, that of course, as I said earlier, Milford was not easy for me to get to, or at least where Milford Rec was. Um, it would take a train and a bus, or excuse me, it would take two buses and a train to get there normally, or it would take three buses to get there. I have memories of me and my buddy Edgar. Uh, we went to Milford Rec and Connecticut Post Mall we made a day of it, and it was, a really cold winter day. I remember that. We went there, bought like some games from like Toys R Us in Connecticut Post Mall and stuff like that. I mean, we were deep in our Commodore 64 obsessions at that time. And I mean, I remember we started at like, God, had to be like 10 o'clock in the morning or something like that, or 12 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. And we got on the train and we went to Milford, got on the bus, and oh no, I take that back. We took the bus out there, and then we took the bus from the Dock Shopping Center in Stratford, and we went to the Connecticut Post Mall. And we went there, went to the arcade, went to stores, bought stuff. Then we went to Milford Rec, spent more money. Now by this time it's getting late. So I remember, I think we had to walk it from Connecticut Post Mall to the Milford train station. Fortunately, Milford's not a really big town, but when you've been on your feet all day and you're, tired and sore, and it was in the middle of winter too, so we were both freezing our butts off by the time we got to the train station. Then we got on the train, got downtown, then we went over his house, played the games that we bought. Then I remember I had to ask my stepfather for a ride home that night. Because by this time, it's like, God, it was at least like 9 o'clock at night by the time we got done. So I had to basically walk to a diner, call my stepfather, and he came down and picked me up. I have memories like that. So the last time I went to Milford Rec, it was the year 2000. And by that time, the arcades weren't doing that big a business. But then again, it could have been then. I think it was a night during the week when I went down there and school was in session. So, not a lot of kids were out and about. That and also arcades were kind of on a serious decline by this time. And even this one, which was, like I said, the biggest one in the state. But I still had some fun there. I played games, and, sort of reminisced about, how it all started here. And then I didn't find out it had closed down until I went back to Connecticut in 2005. I went to go get the rest of my things I left behind when I moved out of state in 1993. And I had taken a week's vacation off my job to go do it because it was going to take that long between, seeing my friends, seeing my family, getting a rental truck and getting all my stuff packed and driving it back to Michigan. Yeah, it was going to take me about a week. So one night I had a rental car and I was just, driving here and there. I had spent some time with my buddy Rob. I spent some time at his house hanging out with him. And I said, just for the hell of it, I'm going to go to Milford Rec and see what's doing. I think it was like, 9:30 at night, close to 10. And even during the week, Milford Rec was open until at least 11 o'clock. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to go there, play some games, have a little fun before I go back to my stepfather's place because I was staying with him at the time. So I drive up there and I was so sad because not only was Milford Rec closed, they had demolished the building. It was in the process of it being, I think it was in the process of it being broken up so that, all the materials that made up the building could be hauled away. Of course, the property was fenced in and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, that was a really sad day. I felt really bad about it. But, yeah, all good things must come to an end, apparently. Let's see, Gompers. Like I said when I described all the Connecticut arcades I used to go to, this one was about 2 miles up the road from Milford Rec. I'd only been there maybe 3 times, tops, but it was a unique little spot. It wasn't as huge. It wasn't huge at all. It was like small to medium sized arcade. It wasn't huge. It was just a regular storefront, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been a standalone building, but I can't remember. Um, but yeah, I mean, but like the Tilt Arcade in Connecticut Post Mall, it had games that Milford Rec didn't have. And that's saying something, considering how many games Milford Rec had. Milford Rec had at least 100 to 200 games. At the height of their powers, it had to be well up over 200. So, um, there was one day in, I want to say, 85. I just wanted to go up there, and play some games because I had gone to Milford Rec, and I was just like, let's just see what Gompers is about. So I walked up there, and lo and behold, it was gone. Another kind of sad day. I'm always a little sad when an arcade closes down. The Showcase Cinemas. Okay, this is a movie complex in Orange, same town where Gompers was, right off I-95. Um, when I was a little kid, my mother and my stepfather used to take us here. My brother and I used to take us there to go see movies. Um, which is funny because we had a movie theater in our neighborhood, but this place actually had movies. That this was before the Mirror Theater split into two. It was one big theater when I was growing up. Then when I became a teenager, it split into two movie theaters. Um, this one kept expanding throughout the years. I mean, it went to four, then it went to six, then it went to eight. By the time I think they closed down, I think it had 14. Well, the last time I was there was 1992, but they had 14 movie theaters in that place. I think they had as many as 17 before they finally closed down. It was a fantastic movie theater. Um, the lobby itself was huge. But the one thing that always drew my attention is that they had video games in the lobby. They had these little custom made white cabinet enclosures with a blue shaded screen, which, they had video games in. And they had, I remember when I was a little kid, went to go see a movie, and I want to say 78, and they had Space Invaders in them. Another, we went there again in 79, they had Asteroids. Um, and they had, like, oh God, I want to say they had at least, like, eight of these things. At the very least, eight. I want to say 12, but that might be too many. But I will say at least eight of these little arcade machine cabinets. And every time we went in, depending on how much time we had before the movie started, and there were a couple of times where I would ask my mom for a quarter, I'd go over there and play a game. They'd go into the movie theater, they tell me which movie theater they were going into, and then after I got done playing the game, then I would come in and watch the movie with them because, that's just how it was for me. Video games was important. That's why I call myself an addict. Um, so, I mean, the last time I went there was 1992. Me and the group I was hanging out with at the time, we went to go see the Blade Runner remake. Yeah, I think that was 92. It might have been 91, but I think it was 92. Um, that's the last time I went to the Showcase Cinemas. They still had those machines, but I remember we just went into the movie theater as a group, and I didn't go over there and play any games. Um, the one story I have about that is that one time in 1985, I was hanging out, or was it 85? No, might have been like 87. 87, maybe 88, somewhere in there, maybe even more than further than that, maybe even, no, you want to know what, it was like 1990. Um, I was hanging out with Mark still at this time. Yeah, as a matter of fact, it was 89, I remember. So I was hanging out with Mark. It was kind of a little less frequently because now we're both older. 1989, I'm 20 years old going on 21, and Mark is what, 23 going on 24, or 24 going on 25, somewhere in there. Um, and every once in a while, at this point, sometimes I get a phone call from Mark saying, "Hey, you want to hang out with, want to come over to um, my girlfriend's place and come hang out, or you want to come, I'm having a party, you want to come hang out at my place." It would happen every once in a while. So, um, I still didn't have a car at this point. Um, so I basically rode my bike everywhere. So basically, if I was going to his place, I would get on my bike and ride up into the wilds of Trumbull. I mean, it was probably, Mark lived probably about 4 miles north of the Trumbull Mall, if I remember right, somewhere around there. Um, and his girlfriend that he was dating at the time, she and her family lived out in Milford. Interesting family, really nice people. They had moved from Connecticut, or moved to Connecticut from Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, they were really good people. The parents were really nice. His girlfriend was pretty cool. His girlfriend's younger sister was pretty cool. And I would just anytime they had like a party or get together over there and I was invited, I just get on my bike and go. um so he basically said, you know come on over, we're hanging out at my girlfriend's place. And I said, okay, cool, I'll be over there in, like, give me an hour. And I would get on my bike and I would ride to Milford. Now that's not exactly um a short ride. It would take me probably about close to 45 minutes to get to Milford from my house. And that was if I was hauling ass. And there were a couple of hills that assisted with that, thankfully. Because there was one that the hill was so big on Boston Avenue heading east towards Stratford, that it was really hard to get. I mean, it was really steep. So if you got all the way up to the top and you started pedaling and you just pedaled as fast as you could carry that momentum almost all the way to the Dock Shopping Center in Stratford for almost a mile, I would say, maybe even further. Um, and where they lived was just over the bridge in Milford, so I would go there and hang out with them. So I'm hanging out with them one night, and they're like, "Let's go to the movies." And I looked at Mark. I said, "Hey, Mark, I don't have money for that." I was broke at that point. I was in between paychecks at the time. And he said, "Yeah, don't worry about it. Just come with us." Um, and so they went and watched a movie, and they didn't have enough money to front me to watch the movie with them. And I said, "No, it's cool. It's cool. I've got, uh, I think I had 50 cents on me." So I went into the lobby while they went into the movies, and they had a Map Mania machine in there. And by this time, I had fully mastered Map Mania. I mean, we're talking, 80, 89 or something like that, 88, 89, somewhere in there. I had fully mastered that game. So basically, I sat down in front of it on one quarter and I played it for the almost 2 hours that they watched the movie. When they came out of the movie, I was still playing a game. I think I turned, yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm certain of it. I turned that game over. That game turns over at 1,000,000 points. Um, and by that time, I was just, everybody came out and they were just like, "Wow, you're still playing?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm pretty good at it." And so, and after that, I just let the game, let myself get pinned, and we all uh, piled in our cars, and we headed back to his girlfriend's house, and I think we spent the night there, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but yeah, those are my memories of the Milford area, the arcades that were in the area, and all the things that you know I uh, that I experienced growing up. So that will do it for Arcade Rundown. Once again, got any questions, comments, You can get a hold of me at arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. So now then, from there, let's go into top tens. Top tens. Okay, 1981. This is probably the hardest top 10 list that I had to come up with by far. I mean, 1982 was just as hard. 1980 was difficult, but this one is the hardest. 1981 is when video games really started ramping up. And that's saying something considering the craze that started with Space Invaders that carried all the way through to Galaxian, then Pac-Man, and, in 80, and then all of a sudden 81 comes in and everything goes up to another level. It was crazy. By this time, I'm 12 going on 13. I'm at the mall as much as I can be. I still haven't quite discovered Spankies yet, but I'm at the Trumbull Mall arcade a lot. I'm just getting to know Mark at this point. So yeah, I'm a regular over there, and that was like my home base. So yeah, so without any further ado, let's just get into it. Again, these are not in any particular order of preference. Like I said, it's just too hard for me to come up with a actual 1 to 10 list, so I'm not even going to try. So, 1981, let's just get into it. Donkey Kong. Now, like I said, in 81, Donkey Kong was it just ruled the roost from the time it came out until probably to this day. And of course, it had a bit of a renaissance with the King of Kong movie that came out several years ago. It was a fantastic game. Everybody was playing it. I'm going to review Donkey Kong in Are You Experienced in a future episode. I think the very next episode, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, I mean, I remember from the moment it came into the Trumbull Mall arcade, everybody was all over it. It was a very different game as opposed to what else was going on at the time. Okay. Galaga, of course, 1981. Galaga, to this day, remains one of my favorite video games of all time. Again, it's the sequel to Galaxian, which came out in 79. I reviewed it, did a full rundown on it last episode, and not much more needs to be said. Trumbull Mall Arcade didn't have Galaga at first. I think they got a Galaga machine later. But the Rexall drugstore in the mall proper actually had a Galaga machine. That's the first time I remember running into it. And then, like I said, I ran into it in the train station, Bridgeport train station, and then as the years went on from 81 going into 82 into 83, it's like you couldn't see an arcade that didn't have a Galaga machine. That's just how it was. Okay, but moving on from Galaga, go into Bosconian. Now, this one is kind of funny because I consider this the sequel to Galaga, even though it's kind of not. But it's basically Galaga, more or less kind of Galaga in 8 directions. Galaga is a vertical shooter like Space Invaders. Bosconian is a free flight 8-directional game. Basically, you fly through space, avoiding asteroids, either avoiding them or shooting them, and avoiding mines or shooting them, and going up to space stations and trying to destroy them, either by shooting the center or by shooting all the pods around the base. And all this time, you're avoiding the shots from the base. You're avoiding enemy fighters that try to ram you. You're avoiding and trying to shoot enemy formations, which basically take off from a base, and they basically try to ram you. You have to shoot the leader of the formation, and the other ships in the formation will break away and try to get away from you. This is a game that anytime I find it, I play it. The arcade in Brighton has a Bosconian machine. That's where I get my fix these days, aside from emulation, of course. Frenzy. Frenzy is the sequel to Berserk by Stern. It's a lot harder, a lot more enemy robots trying to kill you, trying to shoot you, trying to run into you. Sometimes during some levels there are reflective walls which will reflect not only your shots but the shots from the robots. So you gotta know your angles. As a matter of fact, as you proceed further into the game, there are levels where all of the walls are reflective, which can work for or against you. In this game, which is a big difference, you can shoot Evil Otto, the little smiley face robot that will come out after a certain amount of time and try to kill you. You can actually shoot it 3 times for points, and if you shoot it basically 3 times. After the 3rd time you kill it, then right after that another Evil Otto comes out, but faster, like on an order of magnitude faster. Just a brief memory on that game. There was one game where I was greedy for points and I was shooting Evil Otto. I was right by the exit to the level. All the robots had been killed, so now I'm in a spot where I'm shooting Evil Otto as he comes out, and he starts off slow. So basically, you can set yourself up and shoot him, and then the second time I killed him, and then the 3rd time he basically will cover the length of the screen in half a second, and somehow I shot him 3 times. And then the 4th one came out and he covers it in like a 1/10 of a second. So, I don't remember if I got off that level or not. But anyway, that's Frenzy. Frogger. Classic. Anyone who knows anything about video games knows about Frogger. But yeah, it's one of those games that it's kind of timeless to this day. It had a bit of a resurgence with the Seinfeld episode where George basically finds the Frogger machine in the pizza place he used to go into when he was a kid, and his high score was still up there. But yeah, I mean, it's a game that's timeless. Gorf. This one was fantastic on all kinds of levels. I probably will cover this in RU Experience because it kind of deserves it. But basically, Gorf is like what? Space Invaders, Laser Blast, Galaxian. Yeah, it's 5 games in one. And basically, it's like Space Invaders meets Galaxian meets 3 different other games that never came. And of course, 2 other games, and then there's the mothership at the end. And as you, when you destroy the mothership, you go up in rank, which was really cool. And it would have off to the right, on an actual dedicated Gorf machine, it would have the rank of your playing rank as you're playing the game. And as you get through the levels and keep destroying the mothership, you keep going up in rank. And it's fun. The last time I played Gorf was at the arcade in Brighton. I got up to just short of Space Avenger, which was unfortunate. But, that's actually pretty good considering I hadn't played Gorf with any sort of seriousness in years. Ms. Pac-Man. I covered this, I believe. As a matter of fact, I'm going to check. Edit. Yeah, there it is. I covered it in the very last episode in RE Experienced. Once again, this is another iconic video game. And definitely deserves to be on this top 10. There's nothing I can say now that I had not said in the previous episode. So go ahead and listen to that. Okay, this is a personal favorite of mine, which makes the top 10. Pleiades. Pleiades is more or less the sequel to Phoenix. And, it's a lot, it's a different, it's a lot more difficult. And I find this to be one of the most fun games to play in arcade or in simulation. The controls, of course, are simple, but um, it's still a lot of fun to play, and I still get a kick out of it to this day. The arcade in Brighton has it, so almost any time I'm there, I'll play that alongside Phoenix because they have those two machines located right next to each other. Quicks. Now, people call it kicks. I call it quicks. Um, this machine freaked me the freak out when I was a kid. I mean, the sounds of that game gave me nightmares. And I'm not joking. That is not hyperbole. There were times where I would be asleep and I would just somehow I'd be playing that game and the sounds of that game just would freak me the heck out. Um, Trumbull Mall got this in, I want to say, like, I'd say shortly after it came out in '81, and and it was a game where everybody was playing it for the longest time, and everybody was trying to get high scores and everything like that. I mean, I was into I got caught swept up in the enthusiasm of the game for the game, but I was never as good as some of the guys. I mean, Mark showed me some tips on that game, but I just wasn't as good. It required a lot of planning, and either things went well or they didn't. Stargate, sequel to Defender, and in what is it, Score? I think that's the name of the book, How to Beat the Top 16 Video Games, which came out in '82, if I'm not mistaken. Stargate was one of them, and he said, the author basically wrote that this game has more controls than Space Shuttle, which is pretty accurate. It takes the difficulty of Defender and puts it on another level. And, you have, an actual Stargate in the actual game. So if you are an expert, you could actually um basically what you had to do to use the Stargate. Now, if you used it normally, it would just teleport you to another area of the planet. And if there was a humanoid being captured by a lander, if you ran in the Stargate, it would take you right to that where that lander is, so you could rescue the humanoid. And basically, you had a progressive bonus. If you rescued a humanoid and didn't put him back on the planet, it would be 500 for the first one, 1,000 for the second, 1,500 for the third, and then 2,000 points for the fourth. And then if you made a run directly to the Stargate and went into it, you would warp ahead to, I think you warped ahead to level 5, if I'm not mistaken. Um, I mean, I watched my buddy Mark and a bunch of other regulars play this game, and they used to basically warp ahead to like level 10. They would do it, they would basically do the rescue thing twice. Um, which I think that's as far as you could go using that. So, yeah, it was a hard game. I'm trying to remember. The highest score I think I ever got on Stargate was like, oh God, I'd say like what, 300,000 or something like that. I mean, I've seen guys, especially out of the crew that used to frequent the Trumbull Mall arcade, they get upwards of 1,000,000 points easy. And Stargate also was one of the games released by Williams that not only had a top score, which you write, your initials, and, if depending on the settings of the game, you could actually write a message on on it, if you got the high score, but also it had like a top, what is it, a top 25 or something like that. So even if you didn't get the chief score, you at least got on the board, which was kind of important back then. Okay, honorable mentions. Astro Blaster, which I talked about. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. No, I didn't talk about that. I was thinking Astro Fighter. I'm sorry. Astro Blaster, by Sega, and it had had voice synthesis in it, and it was a really cool game. Excellent graphics, really challenging gameplay. I mean, you were really good at this game if you got to, I want to say, the third or fourth batch of enemies. They would all come down in various attack patterns. Some of them would come from the top of the screen, some of them would come from the sides, some of them would loop down and loop back up, some of them would have like these weird side to side movements. Basically, I think this game was the direct inspiration for Mega Mania by Activision, which is kind of more or less Astro Blaster for the 2600. Ladybug. I didn't really get into this game until I played the ColecoVision translation, which is almost perfect. It's a maze game with flipping doors, and it's sort of like a combination of Pac-Man and I want to say like Pac-Man and Mr. Do in a way. It was made by Universal, which made Mr. Do, so the game was pretty similar. I wasn't really good at it, but I used to watch people who were. I tried to pick up tips. Didn't work all that great because it required a lot more strategy than Pac-Man. It really did on some levels. Omega Race. This game, oh my god. This game, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. This is one of those games that you love to play, but it would make you want to tear your hair out. Basically, it's a game. It's more or less a shoot 'em up, but it's within a quote unquote racetrack, with walls you can bounce off of, and there's just a ton of different strategy involved in it, and maybe I'll cover it in a future Are You experience. Maybe I won't. It all depends on whether I can actually kind of get back into it. Satan's Hollow. This game, this game was quite interesting. It was a vertical shooter, but with a lot of supernatural elements to it. And basically, you had enemies that would fly above you, that would dive bomb you, and if you killed one, you would see a bridge segment appear on the bottom left. You would go over, pick it up, move over to the right, because there's this little chasm that you have to form a bridge section for. And basically once you got all of the bridge sections, you would hear a da 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 da, which would tell you that the bridge was complete, and you can move across that bridge over to a side screen where you would fight Satan himself. And he would come out and he would just start moving in a certain pattern, moving very quickly, and you would try to shoot him. And if you shot him and killed him, you got 1,000 points for him, and then you got like 1,000 points for each level that you completed before you went over to fight him. And you could actually stretch it out to where you could actually get like 10,000 points per 10 screens that you got. So, it would just keep counting. It would just go 1 to 9, then it would have a red flag for 10, and then it would keep going from there. After you killed Satan, it was like sort of, then you would get like additional firepower. And if you killed him again, you get more firepower. So it was, and you would need that firepower in the later stages, because you would have at least 30 enemies on the screen in these really aggressive patterns that would just kind of just start dive bombing you. And of course they're shooting like these fast missiles that would actually semi-track your fighter as you're moving at your base, as you're moving from side to side. And not only that, then they would try to ram you directly. There were some enemies that would drop these eggs that would either destroy sections of your bridge, or they would actually be like these little like phoenix like demons that would be like explode on the ground. They would stay there for a while. If you ran into it, you died. I mean, it was a really hard game, but it was fun to play. Let's see, Space Fury, another game by Sega with voice synthesis, the same voice actor that was in Astro Blaster. Now that I think about it, that one was more of a asteroids type game, but you also had, if you completed the level quickly enough, you would get onto a screen where you'd have these different shells. I'm trying to remember the colors. I think one was green, one was light blue, and one was dark blue. The green one would shoot one shot forward, two shots back. The light blue would shoot in three directions, forward, left, and right. And the dark blue one had four shots that would shoot straight forward. And you would basically turn, once you got to that screen, you would turn and go to one of the shells, and it would close around the nose of your fighter, and you get a bonus points. And then you would go on to another ship. Now, while all this is going on, the voice synthesized alien is talking junk to you. It would say things like, "So, you survived. You know, it would be like, my warriors," or something like that, or, "my destroyers will end you," or destroy you, or something like that. I may just find some, maybe there's a YouTube clip that plays the voice synthesis. If so, I'll upload it to this podcast so you can hear it, because it's very interesting. Space Tactics. Now, Sega in 1981, they really started coming into their own, that I saw, because they were putting out not only quite a few games, but they were different. They were all, they weren't all of a piece. They were different. Like, Space Tactics is basically a pseudo 3D version of Space Invaders. Basically, you're in control of a cannon, and you're basically shooting oncoming waves of enemies that are moving towards you, trying to get into range of where your cities are. It's sort of a combination of like Tail Gunner and Missile Command. You have a shield, which you can, you hit the shield button, it puts a shield over your cities, which will block enemy bombs. Basically, you're basically trying to time it so that you hit enemies and trying to keep them from getting too close to your cities, because then they'll start trying to bomb your cities. And each one of your cities also has like an energy missile sitting on top of it, and you could hit a button to launch it. It's sort of like a last attempt to defend your city, for whatever reason, if you couldn't get over there in time to shoot the shots, or if you were out of shields or whatever. It's an interesting game. I love playing it to this day. This is one of the games that I found at the Midway. That's the only place I ever found it. Every time I went to the Midway from 81 until like 84 or 85, I would go, when I was in the arcade tent, I'd play Space Tactics every time. I loved that game. It was fantastic. I was very happy when I was able to find it in emulation. Okay. Super Cobra / Scramble. These games. Oh my God. When these games came out, oh my goodness. Scramble came out first, and then Super Cobra came after that. But I think they were roughly in the same year. Scramble, I mean, basically it's a horizontal shooting game, where basically you're trying to get through the various stages to get to the end of the stage, and destroy all the bases and then then it all starts over just faster and more difficult. While you're flying along the ground, of course, the ground is moving beneath you. Beneath you are bases and rockets, which will lift off from the ground to attempt to collide with your ship. And of course, fuel pods. And while you're running, your ship is using fuel, so you have to bomb or shoot fuel tanks to replenish your fuel to get through the various stages. I was never very good at these games. I really wasn't. Super Cobra was even tougher. You were flying a helicopter. You not only in addition to the bases and missiles and fuel tanks, now you have ground-based cannons shooting at you. And not only that, now you've got various challenges coming from the right side of the screen, and same thing in Scramble. There's one where there is a bunch of UFOs in a down and up pattern going across the screen towards your ship, and you basically have to shoot them or avoid them. Same thing with Super Cobra. Super Cobra's Scramble just a lot tougher. Turbo. Turbo is the sequel to Monaco GP by Sega. And now, I loved Monaco GP. It was really cool. I've already talked about it in top 10s of 79, if I'm not mistaken. And Turbo's the sequel to it. Now, instead of just a top-down view, it's more of an isometric view. And basically you're having to deal with, just like in Monaco GP, you're dealing with road conditions, but you're also dealing with curves. You're dealing with much more difficult situations to be in. You're dealing with ambulances coming up from behind you, trying to pass you. Although, it's just there to make life more difficult to avoid, because you've got to avoid the ambulance to keep from crashing. And, it was a fun game. It really was. I mean, I've played the stand-up version. I think I played the sit-down version once. The arcade in Brighton has it, but it rarely works, unfortunately, because it's a lot of fun to play. And when it's on free play, of course, you can play it as much as you want, so you can actually get better in a shorter period of time. But it's one of my favorites. One of my favorite driving games of all time. Vanguard. This is a personal favorite of mine. And like I said, this was a hard top 10 because most of the games in the honorable mentions could make top 10 very easily. But I decided to stick with the basics, so to speak. Vanguard is a vertical and horizontal shooter, and it's going through various stages to make it to the end boss to try and kill him for extra points. And it requires different challenges. It has different challenges during the different stages. There are some stages that are really hard. There's some stages that are really easy. There's some stages that are just basically a point fest. That basically you're just shooting all the targets in front of you, and the only thing you have to worry about is not running into an energy barrier. But you basically have to shoot the emitters on the bottom or top of where the gate is, and then it'll cut off. And this is one of the games where, most of the time if I go to the arcade in Brighton, because they have a Vanguard machine, I play it. I mean, I remember just being so taken by this game in not only at the James E. Strait shows when they came to town during the summer, but also the Lafayette Plaza Arcade in downtown Bridgeport. They had a Vanguard machine, and every time I went in there to play games, I always played this game because it was fun. And it also had like the Flash Gordon battle theme to it, which is kind of weird. I'm still wondering how Queen allowed that because it was a direct rip-off of that theme in the game. And I'm pretty sure this game came out after Flash Gordon came out in 1980. And for those who don't know about this movie, go on, where you got to go to see it, whether it be Hulu or Netflix or wherever you got to see it, but see it. It's campy as hell, but it's fun. One of the best movies of 1980 in my regard. But anyway, those are my top 10s. So if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, get a hold of me at arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. Okay, on to the last segment of the show, which is Are You Experienced?
I'm too old for this. Hiding in front seats like a teenager.
Hobie, I think I'm getting too old for this stuff.
I'm getting too old for this.
Listen, you was born too old for this.
I'm getting too old for this.
I'm getting too old for this. Lying wet arse to my heather chasing other men's cattle.
I'm getting too old for this sort of thing.
Maybe we're getting too old for this. What do you think, huh?
I'm not too old for this shit. I'm not too old for this shit. You will not. We're not too old for this shit.
We're not too old for this shit.
We're not too old for this. Say it like you believe.
We're not too old for this shit.
Yeah.
We're not too old for this
I'm not
shit.
gonna buy a hemorrhoid cushion.
We're not too old for this shit.
Are You Experienced? Tempest. Okay. This game was weird. It really was. Now they say that Tempest came out in 1981, even though the copyright for Atari was 1980. Tempest is an arcade game by Atari Incorporated in 1981, designed and programmed by Dave Theurer. It takes place on a three-dimensional surface, sometimes wrapped into a tube, which is viewed from one end and is divided into a dozen or more segments or lanes. The player controls a claw-shaped spaceship named Blaster that crawls along near the edge of the playfield, moving from segment to segment. Tempest was one of the first games to use Atari's color quadrascan vector display technology. It was also the first game to allow the player to choose their starting label, a system dubbed Atari Skill Step. This feature increases the maximum starting level depending on the player's performance in the previous game, essentially allowing the player to continue. Tempest was one of the first video games to sport a progressive level design in which the levels themselves varied rather than giving the player the same layout with increasing difficulty levels. The object of Tempest is to survive as long as possible and score as many points as possible by clearing the screen of enemies that have appeared on the playing field. The player's ship can rapid-fire shots down the tunnel, destroying any enemies within the same segment, and is also equipped with a Super Zapper, which destroys all enemies currently on the playfield once per level. A second use of the Super Zapper in a level destroys one random enemy. Enemies swirl around the far end of the playfield, then enter the playfield and move towards the player. There are multiple types of enemies, each of which has a different behavior. At higher levels, some enemies leave a spike in the middle of the lane as they travel towards the player. A spike can destroy the player's ship when the player warps out to the next playfield. Other enemies travel to the player end of the playfield and flip from lane to lane, killing the player if they move to the lane the player is on, firing while the enemy is changing from an adjacent lane kills this type of enemy. When all enemies are destroyed or reach the near end of the playfield, the player warps to the next level by traveling down the playfield. As the player warps to the next level, he or she must avoid or shoot away any spikes. The player loses a ship when an enemy comes into contact with their ship, shoots it, or otherwise destroys it, or if the ship hits a spike while warping. At certain point thresholds, the player earns a new ship, however 6 lives are maximum. The game is over when enemies destroy all the player's ships. Which is exactly correct. Yeah, whoever wrote this Wikipedia page has it exactly right. This game was really funky. I mean, once you figured it out, it was a lot of fun. And once you got past the weirdness of it and just looked into the actual brilliance of the game, it was one of the best games to come out in that era. Trumbull Mall Arcade got it in 80 to 8. I think it was like early 81 when they got it. And, then all the regulars glommed onto it. Everybody was playing it. And then probably, I want to say, going into 82, everyone started to really get good at the game. So now it was like, okay, what color of levels can you get to? Going back to the Wikipedia page, I'm talking. The actual. Okay, yeah, it even says so here. Each one of the difficulty levels have 16 screens. It starts off with dark blue on for each one of the screens. When all the 16 screens have been played, the sequence repeats with a different color scheme and a higher difficulty level, including the invisible level at level 65 to 80, which is crazy. And it's just absolutely nuts because it goes, I'm trying to remember, it goes from dark blue to red to green to light blue. I think it goes to white, then it goes to black. I think that's how it goes. I mean, that's just going straight off memory. I can't even remember how it goes, how it actually goes. But I know red is the next one. I think green is the one after. It's either green or light blue. It's one of those two. So anyway, so I mean, I remember there was one time I went to the arcade and all of the regulars are playing this game, nonstop. I mean, they've got the row of quarters going, and they're just basically they're just dumping quarters in, once their games are over. And they're just going and going and going and going. And I remember I got in on that train towards the end. I think they had finally stopped playing it. And I got in on it because I play, so I got in. So I think my highest score on Tempest was like 684,000 or something like that. But to be fair about it, I got in on the tail end of when all the other guys were playing it. So I think they were up around. I take that back. They got to the invisible level. I remember that. Now, by that time, everything is happening so fast, you have to be on the ball. And if you're not on the ball, you are going to die very, very quickly. So yeah, I mean, it was one of the best games of the time. I mean, it got everybody's interest. I mean, I still play it. I mean, every once in a while. I'm nowhere near as good as I used to be. I mean, on my own, I could get to the light blue or green level, whatever the third set of levels is. And I mean, the last time I played it, I was a little frustrated because I couldn't get past the red set of levels. And of course, like it said, it's progressive, so that if you die at a certain point, you can continue and you can just go back to the last I think it goes in like I think it goes 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, and so on and so forth. It's like going up on odd numbers. So if you die on a stage in between, like say stage 15 and 17, you have the option of continuing at level 15. So it's a lot of fun. It's fun. It's funky. It's just one of those games that is just pretty cool to. It's cool to play. It's cool to watch. There's always something going on, especially once you start getting up in the upper levels. But it's just one of those games where it just catches your eye and kind of keeps it for a while. So yeah, that's Tempest. So yeah, if you have any questions about this game or comments, just drop a line at me, arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com, or the voicemail 734-743-2433. Okay, let's see now. I think we've gotten on the road segment. Do we? Do we possibly? Yes, we do, as a matter of fact. Okay, moving right along, we have On the Road. Okay, it is Monday, November 27th, 2017, 12 o'clock high noon. I said I would do it, so here I am doing my delivery route at work, and while I've kind of got the experience and the thoughts kind of fresh in my head, I'm going to give an in-depth review of my experience at the arcade in Brighton. Last time I was there, just to give, second to last time I was there. Second to last time I was there, I didn't have a really good experience. Most of the games were broken. A lot of them were shut down. And that was like, that's just how it was. And I wrote a review on it. I went back there probably about 2-3 weeks ago, just walked around the place, and I was just like, wow, this is a whole lot better. So this holiday weekend on Saturday, I took a chunk of time and I went in there and I actually played the games. And I give it a good solid 4.5 stars out of 5. Some of the machines were not many. I will say that, not many, but some of the machines were just not in what I would call good working order. If I really was going to be anal retentive about it, I would have created a list of the machines that didn't work, what didn't work, and what needed, that they need to be repaired. But I decided specifically not to be that picky. The place gets really hot. That's one of the drawbacks about the place. As I've said, there is it's a 2-floor establishment. On the first floor are a lot of classic games, but also newer games, and also a lot of pinball machines, most of them from, I think the oldest machine they've got is like 2007 or something like that. All the way up to the Star Wars machine, which is the second most recent machine Stern has put out. The newest one being Guardians of the Galaxy, which has not gone, I don't think they've started shipping to customers yet. So, most of the games I played were in perfect working order. From the Atari Star Wars to the Tempest machine right next to it. I played a whole bunch of games. I was very, very happy about that place. $15 is not a major expenditure considering you can play all day. As a matter of fact, I was supposed to do my home care, which is my second job, after being in that arcade for like 3 hours. Well, 3 hours turned into what? Almost 6? I completely lost track of time. I mean, I was just, walking from machine to machine, playing them. All the machines, almost all the machines that can be set on free play are set on free play. And they have a little system where if you push, I think it's on the right slot of the coin, the right coin slot, if you push the coin return, it actually puts a credit up on the machine, which is pretty ingenious, actually. That way you can play whatever you want to play, and it's pretty easy peasy. I was very happy. I got 10,000 on Star Castle, and I haven't played that game in any seriousness in years. Star Castle was a good working machine. Their asteroids machine was not working 100%. Their thrust button was intermittent at best, and you cannot play asteroids just sitting in the middle. You never could, even though I remember when I was learning how to play the game, that's what I did. But you just can't sit there. I mean, especially once you get up over 5,000 points, when the little saucers start coming out, and they're horribly accurate. But anyway, let's see. Put my high score up on a bunch of machines. It's nice to know that, even though I played games like, they had a Ms. Pac-Man machine that had not only a hyper speed Ms. Pac-Man, but also a different scoring dynamic. I think what your score was directly proportionate to how many lives you had left. Because when I first started playing, I was getting 25 points per dot. I think it was, 250 for a power pellet. And then I think it was 1,000 for the first ghost, 2,000 for the second, 4,000 for the third, and 6,000 for the fourth. So yeah, I put up a pretty good score of 440,000. It was a fun game. Definitely breathes a little bit of life back in that game. Played Junior Pac-Man on a hyper speed chip, which made the game a little more fun, especially with the later mazes, because there's so many areas in the on the later mazes, 6, 7, 8 mazes deep. There's so many places you can get trapped, and your speed doesn't count for very much. Let's see what else. They had a turbo machine that wasn't working, which is unfortunate. I wanted to play Spy Hunter, but unfortunately I hadn't figured out that you can put credits up on the machine by pressing the coin return button. So the next time I go up there, I'm going to play a lot more games. Let's see, put my high score up on Mr. Do. I think I got 160,000 points, which is actually really good. That was really good. What else? What else did I play? Yeah, I played a lot of Star Wars, which was fun. I played a lot of Tempest, which was fun, but frustrating because the top 3 scores were way up over 600,000. I was only able to get 230, 240,000, something like that. So I had the whole high score from 4th all the way down to 10th to myself. But I couldn't break the higher scores because I was so rusty at the game. I was getting better at it, but it was also kind of frustrating because it was just I just couldn't, get the movements and, getting the fire rate correct for the red the red stages. You know, the red stages. So, okay. Let's see, what else did I play? I played Frontline, which I haven't played in an arcade since I was in 8th grade. You know, that's the last time I played Frontline, and I forgot how hard that game is. Oh my goodness, that game is hard. I mean, let's see, what else did I play? My God, I can't even think how many games I played. Unfortunately, they had a Street Fighter Champion Edition hack, and I didn't know it was a hack until I actually played it. You know, but I played it, and, you know, I didn't get past the first fight because those hacks are just weird. What else? What else did I play? Played Star Castle, mentioned that. Oh, I tried to straight 9 a regular Galaga, and I only got like, what, 848,000? So, yeah, I forgot that. See, the problem is that when you're used to playing a Galaga machine with fast shots, you tend to play faster. I had to make a conscious effort to slow myself down playing that machine. And, I mean, I could have had, like, probably 950,000 by the time my game ended if I had gotten as many challenging stages as I normally do. You know, usually when I get those challenging stages, I rock them. You know, there's only like one that gives me serious trouble, and I just couldn't get it together to get those things, which is kind of weird because I consider myself an expert at that game. Okay, I'm at a delivery stop, so I'm going to pause this recording. Okay, I'm back. Alright, but yeah, for the most part, almost all of the games that I played were in good working order. The ones that stand out are the Asteroids machine, like I said, the Super Punch-Out machine, the control to the pull-up on the stick to make your fighter duck special attacks from, you know, the other fighters. The joystick is really loose, and it's really made it just really hard. I mean, I still got to the champion, I just got my ass beat. It was terrible. Let's see. You know, the Pac-Man machines were pretty much, the Pac-Man machines were fine. The Galaga machines were fine. Let's see, what else? See, I knew I should have recorded this when I left the arcade on Saturday, because there was more that I wanted to mention that I just couldn't remember, but it is what it is. Like I said, overall, this place gets a 4.5 out of 5. I mean, aside from the, you know, the odd machine not working correctly and the heat and it being so damn hot in the place. I mean, aside from that, it's perfect. All they gotta do is just, you know, tamp down the heat so much, because there are a lot of people in there and a lot of machines. They generate a lot of heat, so aside from that, I think it was fine. Alright, I'm at another stop, so I'm going to pause this. Okay, I'm back. Let's see now. Yeah, I mean, the place is certainly well on its way. I mean, they got to do something about the level of heat in there, though. Oh my goodness. I mean, it was, I won't say it's a sauna, but it was pretty hot. I mean, and it makes me wonder if that's a business tactic to get people to buy waters and sodas out of their little cooler thing they had right next to the front counter. Probably. But yeah, you shouldn't have to do that. I mean, it's good enough that you have it there, you know, for people to buy, because people are thirsty. You know, people get thirsty playing games and so forth. But yeah, it's just, in my eyes, it's not really necessary. Yeah, they do need to get some of the games on the floor fixed. I mean, there was a Dragon's Lair there that they could have a lot of people playing because of the Stranger Things episode / lead-in, which has kind of rejuvenated a little bit of interest in Dragon's Lair, just like how it rejuvenated interest in Dungeons and Dragons last year. That show, I have to actually sit down and watch that show, because that show is doing so many 1980s callbacks and early 1980s callbacks too, that, you know, it's just one of those things that, you know, I should be 100% behind, but unfortunately I'm not at this point. But then again, I just don't watch a lot of TV anyway, as of this point. You know, that, they also probably need to fix that Space Age machine right next to it. If I had if I wanted to really be nitpicky, they should take out they should take out the machines that have second ones. Like they have multiple Ms. Pac-Man machines. I think they have 2, maybe even 3. I must have lost count. They got 2 Galaga machines. They don't need that. You know, those machines can be eschewed for other machines that I know they have. Because I remember how that place was. They had literally 30 or 40 games on one side of the arcade that just were in various states of disrepair. Or, you know, repair, or whatever you want to say. And there are there's just a couple of small areas where they have like a broken down Stargate machine that they could just take out of there and put a functioning game in there. I mean, if I'm gonna be nitpicky, you know, one of the other things is that they had like old pinball machines that they've gotten rid of that I wish they had kept. But also, I understand that they want to keep space for birthday parties, because they have a little bench and seating area for, you know, small birthday parties, which is cool. What else? I mean, aside from that, I don't have very many gripes about the place. I mean, there are a couple, and there are a couple of real nitpicky gripes I have about the place. But I mean, aside from that, it's a really good arcade. They just got to keep their machines maintained, which is kind of hard in this day and age, considering a lot of those machines are almost, there's 1 or 2 that's almost 40 years old now. There's 1 or 2 of them in there that's almost 40 years old. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, it's fine. It's a wonderful arcade, you know, and it's like I've said to a couple of people that I delivered to, a couple of people I were talking to. You know, it's a good place to kind of let your inner 11-year-old run free, wander around. You know, sort of good time to just, if you're in your late 30s, early 40s, and you remember all of these games and all these things. You know, if you were born prior to, 1970, I'd say 73. You know, when you were old enough to actually go into arcades and actually play the games, you know, like I was. If you remember those days and you love playing those machines and, you know, go to this place. I mean, $15 is not a lot for a free play. I mean, depending, of course, on your skill level, you know, you have to put in some time, or you could just float around from machine to machine. I mean, while I was playing Galaga, I was watching this one woman playing Burger Time, which was right next to me. I was watching her play Burger Time, and I basically had to bite a hole in my lip, you know, during pauses in Galaga to tell her that she's playing it wrong. That, you know, the best thing to do is to get the enemies onto the buns and the parts of the hamburger before you drop them down. That way you get points and you get your peppers back, your pepper sprays back. But I just shut up. But there was a time where, yeah, I almost just opened my mouth and went brainy Smurf on her. Excuse me, you're doing this wrong. Papa Smurf always says, yeah. Next thing I know, I'm outside the machine, you know, outside the arcade. You know, somebody literally booted me out of the arcade. So yeah, I just shut up and let her play how I played it. You know, another thing that was impressive about that arcade, they had a full array of Donkey Kong machines. They had Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., Donkey Kong 3, Mario Brothers, they had Donkey Kong Jr. 2, and they had the harder Donkey Kong. You know, and that was impressive. You know, I think they had like, 6, 7 machines, like, all in a row on the upper level back wall, which was actually really cool. Yeah, I played some Donkey Kong. I did okay. You know, I didn't do as great as I normally do, you know. I mean, for me to have a good Donkey Kong game, I have to score close to 80,000 points. But, yeah, I didn't do that. But that's okay, because it's just one of those things where I can't be as results-oriented as I normally am with a game, you know, but at the same time, they're on free play, so the stress to perform as I always felt when I was younger just wasn't there anymore. If I did well at a game, I was good with it. If I did badly at a game, I was good with it, because it didn't matter. I'd already, you know, I wasn't dropping tokens or dropping quarters, which I had a finite amount of. So, you know, it was one of those things where, you know, I just had to remember how to play certain games. I mean, I had to do it with Tempest, you know, and had to do it with Tempest, and, you know, I did actually pretty well at Tempest, considering I haven't played that game with any kind of arcade seriousness in well over 30 years. I mean, the last time I played Tempest with any kind of seriousness was when it was still in the arcade in Trumbull Mall in my hometown. And, you know, I had, I remember that a lot of the guys that I hung out with and kind of learned from, they were playing it, and, you know, they'd gotten all the way to the light blue set of levels. Because let me think, it's red, it's blue, it's dark blue to start, then it's red, then it's green, then it's, I think, white, then it's light blue, and then it's invisible. You know, going from the circle level all the way through to the figure 8 level. And which was cool. That's how, you know, and I just jumped in, threw my quarters in, kept the levels up, and I just kept going that way. Of course, by the time you get to the light blue level in Tempest, everything is just chaos. You know, everything's moving fast. Everything is out. Everything is there to try to kill you. Blah blah blah. And you know, if you can survive, I mean, especially if you're average at the game, you know, if you survive like 3 or 4 levels and you know are able to advance the bonus starting point bonus, you know, you've done your job. Let's see. But yeah, next time I go, now that I know that all you have to do is just press in one of the coin returns, it'll put a credit up on the machine. You know, I'm going to play a lot more games. I didn't know that. If I had known that, yeah, I'd have played a lot more games. Because there were just some games, they have a working spy hunter, they had a working pole position, they had a bunch of machines that I wanted to play, but they didn't have any credits up. And unfortunately, a lot of those games didn't have free play options on them. So now that I know, I'm going to be playing a lot more games. I mean, they had a Quicks machine that I wanted to play, because I'm pretty sure that I can do pretty well at Quicks, because I remember a lot of the tricks and a lot of the ways to do things, and put up high scores. I wish their high scores were permanent, but I know they're not, with the exception of the ones that save to a battery on the PC board. Because there are a lot of machines that I put up high scores on that I want to keep there. Yeah, the Mr. Do was the one that I was especially proud of. I think I got to level 17, which was pretty good. Actually really good, all things considered. Oh, that's right. And playing Mr. Do, I actually got the diamond. I mean, it didn't matter any, because of course the machine said on free play, but that was 9,000 points. That was 9,000 points just for getting the diamond. And I saw that, I'm like, ooh. I immediately had to get it. It was kind of ironic because I'm trying to remember the frequency of the diamond occurring in a Mr. Do game, which if you were playing it on 1 coin per credit, it would give you, it would end the level. If you picked it up, it would end the level, give you 9,000 points, and give you an actual game credit, so you could actually continue playing. I think the frequency was 1 in every 256 levels or something like that. I mean, it's some sort of ridiculously, I mean, not even ridiculous, just there's some sort of rare occurrence. I mean, I remember playing Mr. Do when I was a kid and when I was a teenager, and getting killed trying to make it to that diamond. But yeah, so yeah, that was pretty special. At least to me it was. Let's see. Yeah, I've noticed that, my right firing arm isn't quite what it used to be. Probably because of the job I have, because my job has a lot of physical labor to it. Lifting and carrying metal parts, steel, trays of it in excess of 100 pounds sometimes. And I think I might have strained a muscle or a tendon in my elbow, because I noticed after playing games for quite some time at the arcade that, especially when I decided to try Straight 9 Galaga, that, yeah, I was noticing that my that the tendon in my right elbow was really starting to hurt. And usually that's a time, that's definitely, no matter if you're playing arcade games or home games or computer games, if something starts to hurt while you're playing a game and you've been playing for so long, that's time for you to stop. So even if I still had kept track of time, I probably would have stopped then anyway. Because, yeah, that's the last thing I need is to have, like, a serious strain in my arm or my elbow, considering I have to go back to work in a couple of days. And just as well because there's a lot of stuff today. I mean, as it is, it's 12:39. I'm running a little behind as we speak. Not as behind as I could be, but behind enough to where I'm probably not going to get back to the shop till somewhere around 4, if not afterwards. But anyway, I digress as usual. Yeah, the place was pretty, I won't say it was packed, it was jumping for sure. You know, a lot of kids, a lot of adults, you know, everybody playing games. There were these guys huddled around the Star Castle machine who were probably in their, their middle to late 30s, probably early 40s, somewhere in there, say from between ages 35 to 45, somewhere in there, because those guys were just tickled pink that they were playing a fully functioning Star Castle machine. And, you know, and after they had gotten done with it, they had left, I went on that thing, and I was pretty happy. I rocked it. You know, I got over 10,000 points, which is pretty damn good. I mean, you know, the guys that I played games with and I learned from back in the day, the Star Castle machine in Trumbull Mall, those guys would put up like 25, 30,000 points, you know, something like that. And probably, actually in my day, I probably could put up 20,000, but I was out of practice. And playing games on MAME and actually playing their arcade counterparts, just from a gameplay standpoint, it is very different. You know, it's some games it's easier to play on a controller than actually standing at a machine and playing it, but not many. Maybe one, maybe two, perhaps 3 machines I can think of. You know, but mostly I found that I could play games a lot better when standing at a machine. Excuse me. Standing at a machine as opposed to sitting in front of a monitor screen and playing with a game controller. But, you know, that's just me. I was raised on arcade machines, more or less. So I'll always think the arcade machines will provide a better experience than doing MAME. And quite honestly, it's probably one of the reasons why some people collect arcade machines as it is. You know, as opposed to having as opposed to being able to find MAME ROMs and playing them that way. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, the experience is very different. Very, very different. Let's see, what else? I mean, and quite honestly, you know, I enjoyed myself greatly. I did. It was fun just seeing machines that, even if I couldn't figure out how to, you know, get credits in them to play them, it was just good seeing machines that still worked, you know, that still played the exact same way as they did when I was 11, 12, 13 years old, 14. And as I said, it was just good to just let the inner 11-year-old run around, just go crazy, go nuts. It was fun. I mean, I'm hoping that this is one of those experiences I can share with my son Marcus when he's a little older. Maybe probably when he's about 6 or 7 years old, depending on where I'm living at the time, of course. I'm going to find an arcade or just take a Saturday, give his mother, more or less the day off, and just put him in the car and take him to an arcade. And hopefully he kind of, if he's anything like my son, I mean, he's already 3 years old and he's already holding the game controllers in the correct fashion. Of course, he's probably just imitating me because he's watched me play games on my computer and on my PlayStation 2 and on my Xbox 360, and he's seen me holding the controller, and he's already got it down. So perhaps we've got another gamer in the family. Well, who knows? We will see when Marcus gets a little older. What else? Now, one of the things I want to do is go downtown Detroit. Drive to Detroit. Park somewhere downtown. I'd have to figure out where. And go to a couple of barcades in the downtown area because they're making a comeback. That's another sign that Detroit is making a comeback. Is that not only are you seeing more restaurants, more businesses, but you're also seeing more recreation in the Detroit area, in the greater Detroit area, especially downtown. I remember going downtown Detroit for the first time after I moved up here in 2003, and I was going to, where was I going to? I was going to that's right. I was going over to Windsor to pick up a friend of ours who was going to stay with myself and my roommates. And I remember, my first thought was when I was going through the west side of Detroit, heading downtown to go through the tunnel to go to Canada. Of course, it was a lot easier to go to Canada then. All you had to have was just your driver's license and your birth certificate, and you could just go across the border, willy-nilly. There was nothing to it. Let's see. But yeah, I was picking her up, and I was driving through the west side of Detroit, and I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. This reminds me of the east side of my hometown of Bridgeport, Connecticut, only a lot bigger. Then driving through Detroit, it wasn't as bad as it was in the late 2000s. Like 2007, 2008, 2009, especially after 2009, when the economy went belly up. But it's good. It was good to see that Detroit is continuing its comeback. They aren't stopping, at a certain level. I mean, I remember when Super Bowl, what was it, 50? Was it 50? No, it wasn't 50. Or was it? No, it was, or was it 45? It was one of the Super Bowls where they actually had it in Detroit, and they basically gussied up all the empty buildings in downtown Detroit to hide the blight. And I'm just glad that they kind of don't have to do that anymore. Okay, I'm at a stop, so I'm going to pause it here. Okay, I'm back. I completely lost my track of thought, so I'm just going to go off on another little tangent. Another episode idea for the podcast, if I can ever actually get the time and energy together to get it off the ground, Another idea for the podcast was, the title of it will be A Day in the Life. Day in the life. Yeah, I know I'm hungry now. I can't even talk straight. A day in the life of a self-admitted mall rat. And that's just basically going to break down what happens on a day that I decide to hang out at the mall. And that could be a Saturday, a Sunday, a day during the week in the summer, a day during the week during school when I decide to ditch school, which I have done, and the things I would do. Most of it revolved around hanging around the arcade. I mean, especially once Carlo, the security guy, he knew that I just hung out there. He'd actually put me to work, have me clean off the screen of all the arcade machines, the glass on the pinball machines and stuff, and he'd give me credits on a game. Then there was Eric, who I think took over the arcade after Carlo, who was an older guy, probably in his 60s, late 50s, early 60s, somewhere around there. I think Carlo retired, and I think Eric was the guy who actually owned the arcade. He had guys working for him. But apparently, especially towards the end, probably like 1985, 1986, going all the way up until the arcade closed in 88. He would take care of the place, and I'd clean up the machines for him, and he would give me like 30 credits on a machine like Super Punch Out or something like that. So, alright, I'm going to go grab some lunch and buy some diapers for my son, so I'm going to end it here.
This has been the Confessions of an Arcade Addict podcast. All music is provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find his music at incompetech.com. If you wish to contact the show, you can drop an email at arcadeaddictbrian, that's all one word, at gmail.com. We also have a voicemail number for the show. It is 734-743-2433. Until next time, this is the Confessions of an Arcade Addict podcast.